I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and today we're looking at Necros no Yusei, or maybe that's Necros no Yusai. I always get that mixed up when I'm trying to figure out the correct way to pronounce Japanese names, but you can translate it in English as Fortress of Necros, or Fortress of Neklos, given the L's and R's can be interchangeable at times. Anyway, the point of this week's episode of the PC Engine Files is that this is a Japanese role-playing game which I would love to play for more than 10 minutes, but unfortunately I kind of hit a wall here, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, let me tell you what I do know about this game, having done some research after having played it for this video. This comes from a popular line of toys in Japan that was packaged with candy intended for the young. The toy line featured the evil sorcerer Nekros, hence the name of the game, and 8 heroic champions who were sent to defeat him and his various monsters. So, naturally, that makes an almost ideal situation for a translation to a video game. If they had that intended all along, then they're geniuses, and if they didn't, they stumbled into something by accident that worked out perfectly, so more power to them. I've seen this game described as having a comedic sensibility, and based on some of the animation here in the opening sequence, I can see why that's true. A lot of these characters are bugging out or cross-eyed or have somewhat bizarre looks on their faces that are very emotive and expressive and would cause laughter for any age from the young to the old. I would even say that I'm getting a chuckle out of it myself rewatching it, because I definitely did the first time I played this, but once you get past these derpy animations in the opening, you get to a more traditional top-down role-playing game like Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest, depending on which region you're in, and you wander around talking to NPCs, getting items, getting money, resting if you need to heal up, then going out to fight monsters and level up. You know, all that traditional stuff you do in an RPG. And it certainly feels and looks like it's a high-quality PC Engine game, even if the property it's based on is a little silly in its origin. So they didn't skimp on the development of this game. And who did that developing, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Ask is the name of the publisher, Ask Company Limited, but the developer was Adventure Planning Service. What is Adventure Planning Service known for? Crimson Clover World Ignition, Trouble Witches Neo, and Necros no Yusai. That's almost 20 years apart between two games. Necros no Yusai came out April 20th, 1990, and Trouble Witches Neo came out April 27th, 2011, so I don't know what they were doing in all that time in between time, but this is what I've been able to glean together from various research sources that I found, because there is no Wikipedia entry for this game. You have to do a little deeper digging to find out anything about Necros. And once you do, you discover it's quite an interesting game that even spawned a Windows Dojin fighting game unrelated to the PC Engine version that reused some of the same assets, including the music. So this game had a life beyond the point it came out on the PC Engine. And beyond that, there is not a huge amount of information out there. It seems this game is somewhat obscure outside of Japan, which I can attribute to the fact that it's heavily text-based, and the text is in Japanese, and if you can't read Japanese, you're probably not going to be able to understand what's going on and might not be super interested. But me being the stubborn sort of fool that I am, I was like, okay, it's a top-down role-playing game. I fight monsters, I collect items, I level up. I can get my way through this. I can stumble through these text interaction sequences and get down to the actual fighting. Although it does bog down a little bit when you get stopped by a character who wants to have a dialogue with you. There doesn't seem to be any button press neither the 1, the 2, the start, nothing that allows you to speed through these text encounters. So if I was to get a patch for English to play this game properly, I would also want it to have a hack that allowed you to either skip the cutscenes or at least speed up the text at the speed that it's read to you, so you could get further in the game without just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting while these characters explain their intentions to you. I mean, at least if it was in English, then I might not mind as much, but I would probably still be speed reading it by hitting the 1 or the 2 button and getting through it as fast as I possibly could. But once you get through the dialogue tree and move on to the outside world, you find that you're already well equipped to fight. You have a basic combat attack that involves shooting arrows or punching enemies, and it does a really nice animation where you're running at the enemy or the enemy's running at you, which leads me to believe there may be a little bit of an Earthbound element to it in that you can do an attack on them before they can hit you or vice versa. But unfortunately, unlike Earthbound, you can't see them on the map. The encounters are invisible and somewhat random, and sometimes you can get 2 or 3 encounters in a row just moving from one tile to the next. There doesn't seem to be any consistency with the... I suppose it couldn't be random if it was consistent, right? But at the same time, maybe there needs to be a tweak to it where you're not having 3 encounters back to back in less than a minute. However, the good news is these early enemies are ridiculously easy to defeat. I don't seem to be taking much damage, and I'm getting 5 gold for 1 and 10 gold for 2, so I am leveling up and acquiring wealth to buy more items very quickly with just the basic set of items that comes with my character at the start of the game, which is a nice entry point if you've never played a role-playing game before, giving you a set of equipment that you could actually do something with instead of forcing you to grind out for even the pitiful level that you're at just to get a start. So I give them credit for that part of developing this game as well. It's friendly and geared toward the introductory player who wants to just get started exploring and have a good time figuring out the way this world works. Then again, I don't know that you could do anything else other than that, because when I left town, there was literally only one area on the world map I could go to, so they had to design it that way to some degree just to give you a fighting chance, no pun intended. I really enjoy the way the animation plays out for these enemy encounters. There's almost a Space Harrier type feel when you're charging the enemy or they're charging you, and I love how the camera pans left and right to show that you either landed an attack or they dodged it. So there's some very clever things going on with this game to make it feel like a more immersive world and not just you staring down on top of them like God from afar. Here ultimately is where I ran into a problem with Fortress of Necros, and unless I get an English language patch, I probably won't be able to make any more progress. I keep encountering these bodies of water that I have no way to cross. I don't have an item in my inventory that is like a raft or a boat that would enable me to traverse this area, and even though I chose to turn around and go the other way and found another area, it was surrounded entirely by water, and I couldn't get to the actual village or castle or fortress that was inside of the moats. And it certainly seemed like something I was supposed to do, because the music changes dramatically, as you can hear in the background. So this is an important area, and I'm clearly meant to do something here, but there's a dead end to the left and a dead end to the right, and no way to cross the water in the middle in sight. So sadly, my gameplay comes to an end at this point, but I will be looking for a patch, because this is a fascinating game for me, and I really want to dig further into Fortress of Necros and find out what these characters are all about and what their heroic quest to defeat Necros will lead to in the end. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files. Like, share, and comment to help the channel grow. If you already watched this video, watch one more. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and thank you for watching. Hello, Megamaniacs, and welcome back to the PC Engine Files. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan. Today we are looking at Mizubaku Adventure, or as some of you may know it, Liquid Kids. At first, from the name, I thought this was going to be another role-playing game like last week, and I expected there to be a language barrier problem at some point. But as it turned out, this game felt very familiar to me, and I was like, wait a second. This is a platforming game with a bubble bobble type of element to it where you trap enemies in your water and knock them into other enemies. Why does this feel so familiar to me, and why am I having so much fun playing it? Well, it would be because it's from Taito, the developers of the Bubble Bobble series, so clearly that was an inspiration in making this game, and that means I have some good news for you and a little bit of bad news. The bad news, we'll get that out of the way first. This is a very expensive PC Engine game, minimum of triple digits to own this one, and that's loose. $112 loose plus $15 shipping was the lowest price I could find for it on eBay as of the recording of this video. You go up to complete copies, you're not getting one for less than $170. That's with free shipping. But yes, this is one of those PC Engine games that's very popular, very expensive, very hard to acquire, and never released outside of Japan. So if you want to play it on PC Engine, you are probably using an EverDrive, a Super SD System 3, or emulating it, as I am doing here for this gameplay footage, because unless you have an obscene amount of money to throw around, you might not want to spend $112 on a loose PC Engine HuCard. I did say there was some good news though, and here it is. Taito Legends 2. If you don't need to play the original Japanese version and you're fine with the North American localization, Liquid Kids, in its original arcade form, was ported to Taito Legends 2, and it's available on just about every platform of that era. That means whether it's Sony PS2 or Microsoft's original Xbox or even a Windows PC, you can run it on any of those things. And unlike some of the other games in the Taito Legends series, this one is on every version of Taito Legends 2. They went console exclusive or region exclusive with some of these games, but Liquid Kids was not one of them. It's on all three. Personally, I would recommend the PlayStation 2 version to you. It's $20 loose and $37 complete, but that sure beats $112 loose and $170 complete. And that's not even taking into account there was a port of this game for Sega Saturn, and holy crap, that's $148 loose and $340 complete. So even if you're a fan of Sega Saturn imports, and I certainly am, I just can't recommend those prices. But why, you say to Mr. MegaManFan, why would I want to pay any of these prices to play Liquid Kids or Mizubaku Adventure, whichever you choose to call it? I'll tell you why. It is addictively fun. It looks cute and charming, and maybe even like it's going to be easy based on the opening stages of the game. But once you get to the first boss and onward, the difficulty ramps up significantly, not to the point it's unplayable, but to the point you feel like it's a definite challenge and it draws you back in when you die because you want to keep playing and you want to get further. And to help you achieve that, the game is very generous with its continues. But of course, you can always use save states if you're emulating, so you wouldn't need to worry about that problem. But I'm saying if you're playing it on PC Engine, you've got that option to continue almost exactly where you died. It's very, very close. So the save points are generous, the continues are generous, and the action is very easy to pick up on because you only have two buttons that you need to worry about: jumping and shooting. But why are you doing all this jumping and shooting, and to what end? Well, I'm glad you asked, Megamaniacs, because I'll tell you. You are Hippopo the Platypus, and you're fighting your way across the land of Woody Lake, fighting enemies spawned by the fire demon who kidnapped your girlfriend Thomasoon, and along the way you are also rescuing other platypuses that have been captured by the fire demon. So you are saving the kingdom of Woody Lake and your fellow platypi and your girlfriend, and defeating evil fire demon enemies all in the same quest. That seems like enough motivation to run, jump, shoot, and platform your way through the world of Liquid Kids. Now, I know that this was ported to the Wii's Virtual Console at some point as the PC Engine version, but I think because the PC Engine version was exclusive to Japan, the Wii Virtual Console release was also exclusive to Japan, so that may not be much help for most people. And there were also ports planned for the Commodore Amiga and Atari ST that reached some level of completion but never got released. The Amiga version is reportedly fully completed, and I don't know how far along they got with the Atari ST version, but for whatever reason, Ocean never published them, and that seems like a real shame, because I don't know how well it would have sold, but I know it would have been fun for the people who own those platforms to play. Now, this section gave me a little bit of trouble because these green things, I guess they're fish, but they seem more dangerous than the typical fish. Maybe they're piranhas, or maybe they're just really obsessed enemies that have been spawned from hell by the Demon King. Whatever they are very hard to get around because when I try to knock them into each other, they swim up really fast and take me out. So I kind of have to just spam the heck out of my liquid water bomb attacks and just pray I can get from one side to the other. But it is charming that your platypus is in a little raft riding across the water, so you can traverse it, but you can't swim through it. And also there are certain sections where you can sit on top of a waterfall in your raft and be jetted up to a higher platform where you can pick up different items or bonus points or whatever might be there. It might just be a way to get from one section to the next because there is some very creative platforming you have to do to get around the areas of these stages. It also kind of reminds me of the New Zealand story in that respect. It takes elements of Bubble Bobble New Zealand story and even, I would say, platforming games like Mario Brothers and combines them all together in a very engaging way. Based on the reviews I can find, it seems that the PC Engine version was fairly well received. 85%, 92%, 93%, 88%. There's a couple of rare exceptions here and there. Famitsu gave it 24 out of 40, which seems awfully low to me. And Marikatsu PC Engine gave it 29 out of 40. The lowest one out of all of them seems to be PC Engine Fan. I don't know what they had against it, but I disagree with their score. This is a supremely fun game, and it was also a big success in the arcades. 17th best table arcade unit of the year for 1990 in Game Machine magazine. What's funny is I don't ever remember seeing a Liquid Kids arcade cabinet anywhere in North America, ever. Not at any of the retro conventions I've been to, not at any of the various arcades I've visited, beercades, barcades, regular arcades. No, they just don't seem to exist in the wild. I'm not saying they don't, but they don't where I've been. And I've been to a lot of different conventions over the years with a lot of different arcades, and I've not seen it. So maybe that was the reason it didn't get ported to North America. Maybe they just didn't feel there were enough people who played it in arcades that would buy it for an already very small install base for the TurboGrafx 16. They're like, why are we going to port something that barely got played here, that will barely sell any copies here, to a very small amount of people that even own a TurboGrafx to begin with? On the other hand, you could have made the argument that with such a small install base for the TurboGrafx 16, people were eager to snap up anything that got released for it, so it might have been a huge hit. It might have sold a whole lot of copies to a very small amount of people, but that would still be profitable. And it doesn't seem like this would have been a hard one to port. It's just platforming, shooting, and adventuring. What really needs to be translated here? Not that much. Localization would be easy. I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you find a way to play Mizubaku Adventure or Liquid Kids, and I don't care which version of it you play. You could even pay for that expensive Sega Saturn one if you want to, and by God, more power to you if you can afford that. But I would say Title Legends 2, probably the easiest, most reliable way to own a physical copy that you can play on a PS2 or even a PS3 if you have one of the models that has PS2 backward compatibility, then go for it. Although some of those tend to overheat and die really quick, so you might be better off with a PS2 or a PS2 Slim for playing Title Legends 2. Otherwise, I would definitely say emulate it. I don't see any problem with that. It's preserving the history of this game, and game preservation is part of the goal here. As people like Jeremy Parrish and Frank Spaldi would say, we want other people to continue to know this game, to study this game, and in future generations, learn about the history of video games. Emulation is a very good way to preserve that history. And if you can afford a loose or a complete copy for PC Engine, then sure, by all means go for it. I can't say that it wouldn't be a fun addition to your lineup, even at that ridiculous cost. But let's face facts here. An EverDrive is cheaper than a loose copy of this game, so you could just buy an EverDrive and then play all of the games that you want to. I'm not telling you to bootleg games. I'm just telling you the price comparison when it comes to certain titles like this. You're going to want to own an EverDrive at some point, because when you get into titles like Magical Chase, Mizubaku Adventure, Koryun, Sapphire, the list goes on and on. You know what those big hitters are, and you know that an EverDrive costs less than any one of them, let alone all of them together. In fact, you can get a Super SD System 3 and a TurboGrafx 16 and combine the two together and still spend less than you would on one of these ultra rare titles. Or you could just buy a TurboGrafx Mini, but unfortunately, Liquid Kids is not on there. You could probably hack it and add it on there. I'm sure Mad Little Pixel would know a way to do that, so I would defer to him for modifying your PC Engine Mini or TurboGrafx 16 Mini. And if he doesn't know, Modern Vintage Gamer would definitely know. So, two good channels for you to check out if you're a retro gaming enthusiast. And as I'm giving shoutouts right now anyway, I want to shout out both Intrigued Gaming and Sarumaru, who do streams on almost a daily basis, and they're always playing something retro and fun, so you would probably enjoy watching them live. I know I always do. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the PC Engine Files with a look at Mizubaku Adventure, aka Liquid Kids, a very fun but very expensive PC Engine game to own that has other options you can pursue if you want to play it physically. Otherwise, just emulate it and enjoy the heck out of it, and dream about the day you might be able to own it physically, or somebody gets a wild hair up their rear and does a reprint reissue of this game. Limited run games, get into Hue cards. I'm looking at you folks. Anyway, Mr. MegaManFan signing out, saying I'll see you next Tuesday for another edition of the PC Engine Files. Bye for now. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this is the PC Engine Files. To date, I haven't played a game on this series that I would consider lost media, but Niku Niku Pun probably comes as close as anything ever will, because finding specific information about the TV show that this game is based on is very hard to do. After extensive searching, I came up with one entry on my anime list. It's very short, and it's downright demeaning to the people involved. Quote, anime spin-off from a children's show that featured out-of-work actors dressed up as a giant mouse, penguin, and lion, itself part of the Japanese Watch with Mother TV show for the preschool audience. So I sense about 3 insults in the course of one sentence. It's a spin-off of a show, so it's not really its own show. It features out-of-work actors, which suggests the people on it had nothing better to do than be on this spin-off show. And it's part of a Watch with Mother preschool show series that's definitely intended for the teeniest, tiniest of babies, as Strongbad would say. So you can imagine this is not a very popular entry on my anime list. It's ranked number 11,533, and in popularity it's ranked number 15,597, which means there are 15,596 other things considered to be anime that are more popular than Niku Niku Pun. Technically, if even one person knows it, it's not lost media, but if this was a media glacier, it would be somewhere nautical miles beneath the surface, unseen, undiscussed, and unknown until somebody runs into it, which is exactly what I did here. And since the game itself is very simplistic and not entirely fascinating to play, just going down the rabbit hole trying to find out more about this one was more interesting. So I came across one of those quote-unquote out-of-work actors who actually has a credit for being part of Niku Niku Pun, and that would be Ryusei Nakao, or Nakao Ryusei, whichever way you're correctly supposed to say it. I think last name first is the way that's preferred, but it is something that he worked on, playing the character Porori, but neither the show nor the character Porori have any entries on Wikipedia. Those are both dead ends. So if you're looking for voice actors, he's the only one you can find attached to this show. It's certainly not what he's best known for, so maybe he really was, quote, out of work, unquote, at the time he was part of the show, because these days you would know him better from the Dragon Ball series as Tambourine, Frieza, Cooler, Chilled, and Frost, from Bleach as Mayuri Kurosuchi, from One Piece as Caesar Clown, and from Beast King Go Lion as Takashi Shirogane. So there is a 99.99999% chance that if you knew the name, and I'm sure Emperor Big D from Geekdom 101 knew it the moment I said it, you would know him from any of those things and not Niku Niku Pun. There is slightly more information about the video game than the TV show it's based on, such as an entry on the video game den which reads as follows. 3 creatures, a cat, a bird, and a mouse, arrive on an island where they find a cute little dragon. The poor thing is starving, and they decide to go and help him by finding him his favorite foods, which basically sums up everything you're watching me do right now. You scroll from left to right, picking up whichever fruit is indicated in the menu bar at the top, and once you get 3 of them and reach the end of the stage, you can feed them to the dragon, and he grows a little bigger. And you do it again in the next stage. Nothing impedes your progress. If you bump into enemies too much, you get dizzy for a little while and can't move, but then you completely recover. You don't lose a life. You also don't have any weapons in this game. You can move and you can jump, but you can't attack anything on the screen, so you're no threat to the monsters, and they are no threat to you. The only thing that impedes your progress is having to avoid the patterns so they don't slow you down too much, because sometimes you'll get like birds that swoop down or bees that buzz at you, and if you don't want that delay when you get knocked dizzy, you want to avoid them by ducking under them or jumping over them. That's really the only challenge. You can tell that Niku Niku Pun was a show for the smallest of children, and the game was possibly for those even smaller than that. There is no discernible death threat. This is an entirely friendly game. This is distilling the essence of Adventure Island and Wonder Boy down to its 2 core constituents, moving left to right and collecting items. That's all you do. If you like an absolutely minimal challenge game, then Niku Niku Pun might provide you some entertainment for a little while, but as another review on the PC Engine Bible said, you'll be reaching for the mute button before the end, because this music is tinny, tedious, and repetitive. So I don't want to give whoever at NHK or KSS composed it any credit whatsoever. It is dreadful to listen to. If you're going to play this game, I sincerely recommend that you pick the soundtrack to any PC Engine game you like, put it on your stereo, and listen to that instead. You don't need to hear the action button because all you're doing is jumping. You don't need to hear the puzzles in any of the mini games because you're just sliding tiles around. What do you need the sound effects for that for? There are no sound effects you would be missing by muting the soundtrack to this game. Niku Niku Pun is one of the more affordable PC Engine games, probably because it's not in any significant demand. You can find it loose for $15, $17.99 with free shipping. You can find it complete for $25 with free shipping. It's not going to set you back a great deal if it's something you actually want to own. And I'm not necessarily recommending that you do. I think Niku Niku Pun might be some lost media that was better left lost, some cutting room floor footage to put back on the cutting room floor and leave there. Somebody probably has fond, nostalgic memories of Niku Niku Pun from when they were young. I have nostalgic memories of the Great Space Coaster, and if there was a video game based on the Great Space Coaster, I would probably go out of my way to get it. But I don't know that one exists. I've never heard of it, never seen it. Don't think I'd ever find it. And I feel the same way about Niku Niku Pun. I didn't know it existed. I didn't think I would find it. And now that I found it, I actually feel like I'm not the audience for it, because I have no nostalgic feelings about this show whatsoever. So it's clearly not for me. But, well, maybe it is for somebody out there. I can't totally discount that something in this would jog an emotional response for a Japanese viewer who grew up watching this series with Mother, as that My Anime List entry suggested. So I'm Mr. MegaManFan saying, don't play Niku Niku Pun unless you remember this show, and maybe not even if you do. Bye for now. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and today we are taking a look at Outlive. And I'm going to go ahead and state this off the top. If anybody has the English language patch for this one, please send it to me. This is one of the most impressive PC Engine games that I've played in a while, and it shocks me to think that it came out in 1989 and fit into a 2 megabits U card, because it seems way more in-depth than that, and would be the type of game that if it was released today as a homebrew, it would be hailed as impressive and a technological achievement. The first-person perspective when you're exploring the mazes is incredibly smooth scrolling and visually stunning. It looks like you're really in a 3D environment, even though you're playing a flat 2D screen. And this is 1989 technology we're talking about. This is pre-Doom. This is pre-Wolfenstein 3D. This is pre a lot of things. Whoever at Sunsoft was coding this game did an incredible job. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I haven't even told you what the game is about. So, since there's no Wikipedia entry for it, I'm going to defer to the Video Game Den, which, if I haven't mentioned it before, is an excellent resource when it comes to PC Engine games. Please check them out at videogameden.com. Here's how they describe it. Outlive is a first-person view adventure game where the player takes the role of a bounty hunter from the Imperial Army Reconnaissance Unit. You control a powerful mecha robot called a Fighting Worker, or FW for short, and your mission is to explore the mazes of the planet Rafara, home of an ancient civilization, source of the alien technology used to create the most recent human technology, including the player's robot. You start your journey in a hangar bay with 1,000 credits and a Vulcan gun, and that's all you have to your name. These hangars are scattered throughout the game, and when you find one, you can purchase new weapons, talk to locals, or even fight them in a duel for extra cash. And that's the part where I really regret not having an English language patch, because you can get through exploring the maze without knowing anything else, because there's no Japanese text that gets in the way when you're playing the maze part. You just move down corridors. If you hit a door, you press up and the door opens. If you see tunnels to the left or right, you just turn using the D-pad and you can move in that direction. It's all incredibly intuitive and easy to understand. It even color codes the different mazes, so when you pass through a door from one section to another, you know you've entered a new area of underground passages. This makes it very, very, very friendly to the user. You don't have any kind of auto mapping. It doesn't record your progress like a Super Metroid game, but you can still remember where you've been just by the color coding of the walls. That is a genius idea, so whoever did that should be praised for it. What I really regret is that I can't access the shops and the fights and the other options in the hangar bays when I come to them. I just have to randomly pick and choose different options and hope that I'm getting good things by doing so. One of the times I was in the hangar bay, it seemed like I was buying upgrades for my mech robot using the credits that I had. It seemed like I was equipping guns and armor and other things just by selecting menu options and hitting buy. Or at least that's what I thought I was doing because the number of credits in my account went down. But then I didn't know if I had properly equipped what I had bought. So it would just be genius to have an English language patch to get even deeper into this game than I already did. I am just stunned at how well done this game was, but perhaps more stunned that nobody ever tried to localize it to English, because to me this one could have been a difference maker for TurboGrafx 16. They needed home runs. They needed big titles other than Bonk's Adventure to really sell this system and not have it be fourth in a 3-horse race. This one could have been it. Sunsoft really knew what they were doing. Like, these are the people behind Blaster Master. You've got to think they know what they're doing, right? And they did. This is a well-coded, well-executed game that's a lot of fun to play even without knowing any Japanese. The fights you can even handle because the menu system basically says gun or flee, so you either shoot back at the things you find in the corridors of the mazes, or you run away from the fight if you don't have enough health left and you don't think you can handle it. And I did eventually run into a fight where the robot or gun or whatever it was that I was fighting had way more hit points than I did, and I ran out and it's a game over. And that is the danger of Outlive. It literally lives up to the title of Outlive. You have to outlive everything else in the maze, because if you die, you lose all your progression, any credits you earned, any weapons you equipped. It's all gone. You have to restart from scratch. Although there is a password system so you can record your progress at certain points. If I could figure out how to do that with these menus, because again, it's all in Japanese, and I'm a dumb gaijin who doesn't know any better. So probably have to use save states to keep my progress from one area to the next. And I probably need to level up in the earlier mazes before I get to the different color-coded ones and start encountering monsters that are just too hard for me to fight with the basic set that I get at the beginning of the game. Another thing I'd like to mention is the audio design of this game is top-notch. You could literally just sit there and listening to the opening chiptune for minutes at a time and not get tired of it. It builds up slowly and dramatically, and then it's really fun and rocking once it gets going. And the music when you're exploring mazes is equally compelling. The music changes when you go into the hangar bays, and it's appropriate for those areas as well. There's some thought put into having music that enhances the game as opposed to just being music for music's sake. A good comparison would be Final Fantasy VII. It's somber when it needs to be somber. It's cheerful when it needs to be cheerful. It's energetic when you're in a fight. It really matches the mood of the game at the time you're playing. One website claims this game is actually called Outlive instead of Outlive, live like a live wire, but considering you have to survive in these mazes, I'm going to go with live because that just makes more sense to me. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and I'm telling you to play Outlive or Outlive any way you can. Play it with an emulator, play it on an EverDrive, play a physical copy if you buy one and import it and have a PC Engine to Hue card converter for your TurboGrafx. Whatever you have to do, this should be on your must-play list of games that were made for PC Engine. I think it's that good, and I still want to play more of it after this video is done. So, English language patch, let's find it, let's get on that, let's do it. If it doesn't exist, please, somebody make it. It's a surprisingly affordable game for the system, with it being under $15, even including import shipping from Japan. So get it now while you still can before those prices go insane. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. That helps the channel grow. And I'll see you next week. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and welcome back to the PC Engine Files, where today we are taking a look at Cyber Knight. This is a game that comes with a warning right off the bat that it is, quote, intended for experienced role-playing gamers only. Well, I'm experienced. I've been playing role-playing games since the 90s, but without an English language patch, it's going to be a difficult proposition even for an experienced gamer. But first, let's get into the background of this game. It is a sci-fi game for PC Engine and Super Famicom that combines exploration with strategic combat. The random encounters are considered to be especially high, even compared to the kind of experience you would have playing Final Fantasy games, which is why it's stated that it's for experienced players. The combat sequences are ponderous, as is the plot, as you will see from watching my gameplay footage, because there is an inordinate amount of cutscenes that are heavy on text. I swear, like the first 5 or 6 minutes of this game is just computer generated cutscenes with apparently some sort of space battle taking place. It feels like it's straight out of Star Wars Episode 4, where they're trying to shoot down the lone ship that has escaped with the plans for the Death Star. But there's no Princess Leia, there's no R2-D2, there's no C-3PO. It's just you, the Cyber Knight, and your fellow Cyber Knights, and they're trying to gun you down, and at the last second you make the jump to hyperspace. 3, 2, 1, go! And you escape the battle, and you end up at a planet that looks sort of like Earth. And after I fumbled around with the menus for long enough, I figured out how to land the ship on the planet and get out and explore the Earth. And that's where the whole thing about the high number of random encounters kicks in. That's not really a problem for me. I don't mind random encounters and leveling up and getting good. It's the fact that there are invisible walls everywhere. Once I landed the ship and tried to explore, I could only go a few spaces in any direction before a warning popped up that said, you can't do that. Don't try to go there. You're not leveled up enough to go west or east or north or south or anything beyond what you can see. It's a very clearly invisible wall because it looks like an empty field with grass and trees, but you can't go there. Why? I don't know. Unless I get an English language patch, I don't know what the restriction is, but can't leave this area. So I finally gave up and just started walking around, seeing if I'd get one of those high number of random enemy encounters that was promised in the Wikipedia entry, and I did. And it's pretty standard fare for an RPG. You just pick the enemy that you're targeting and pick your weapon, and you can kind of just mash the button repeatedly, even without having an English language patch. You just go bing, 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 select target fire, just over and over and over and over and over again. And you can win the battle. Although I did have one of the 3 characters in my party take a significant amount of damage from the enemy guns, whatever they are. He got down to like 4 health, so I was in a little bit of danger here, but there's also a town nearby, so I'm sure I could go there and heal. But then again, without the English language patch, I didn't know which buildings to go into or where to go to get a night's rest and pay the innkeeper. Is that even what you're doing, though? I mean, they say it's for experienced role-playing gamers, but this is obviously in the future. It said like AD 2351 or something, so maybe we're getting these mech suits repaired by some sort of engineering expert to restore our hit points. Perhaps Winry Rockbell is in this game. So whatever you do, you've got to recover your health, level up, get items, make progress, but it is very unclear how to do that because I just wandered around this one and only town I could get to, and just talking to the random NPCs who aren't wearing Cyber Knight suits doesn't seem to advance the plot or get me anywhere. There's only one building where even anything remotely interesting happens. At first, these 2 guards show up in front of the building and they're like, "You shall not pass!" And then they talk amongst themselves and they're like, "Okay, I guess this guy isn't a threat. We can let him in." And then you go in there and you speak to a bunch of people. It looks like it's the mayor's house or maybe the king of town. King of town? Maybe he has vats of butter to eat and he's too busy to talk to you. So you just don't really get much of anything here. If the English language patch could explain what you get from talking to the people in this building, wonderful, but it's not like it levels you up or offers you a night's stay at the inn or gives you any items to improve your Cyber Knight suits. I'm guessing this is all just exposition for the plot, and this game is very heavy on that. Finally, out of frustration, I just went to Wikipedia again and tried to figure out what the hell is going on in this game, and it says, in the 24th century, mankind has reached into the expanse of outer space, but the Earth has already disappeared as the center of human civilization, and each star system has become its own independent nation that long forgot where they came from. This sounds like the plot of Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, but there's no psychohistory here. You can guess where this is going. All these independent nations in all these star systems go to war with each other, and space pirates fill the void between these governments, trying to rob the ships that go between the star systems because it's already unstable and everything is in flux. So, your crew is apparently the starship Swordfish, and as I suspected, you are making the jump drive to get away from space pirates at the beginning, and only 26 of your crew survive thanks to the heavy attacks that you were receiving. So then you go down to the human colony that is under attack and try to help them and try to help yourself at the same time. What would help me is figuring out why there are invisible walls everywhere, but until I have an English language patch, I'm going to leave it here. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. As always, thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan and welcome to the PC Engine Files, where today we're looking at Pumping World, but you may know it better as Buster Brothers. And in a shout out to Ryan Taylor, who said he always likes seeing the real deal played on real hardware, I'm doing it today from my TurboGrafx 16 with the SSD 3 attached through an HD cable onto my HD television. This is not what I would call a super sophisticated way to do it. I'm not using an upscaler, a RetroTink, or an OSSC. I've simply got one of the Hyperkin HD cables for Sega Genesis running out of the back of the SSD 3 to my high definition television. Honestly, I think it looks pretty good, but your mileage may vary. Now, if you've never seen Buster Brothers, allow me to give you a little bit of information about it. It started out as a 1989 arcade game released by the Mitchell Corporation, but actually goes back much further than that to a 1983 MSX Japanese computer game called Cannonball, which was the spiritual predecessor. Cannonball was made by Hudson Soft and licensed to Mitchell Corporation, and then they made Pang, aka Buster Brothers, aka Pumping World, and all of the sequels and derivatives that spawned from that, because there are a lot of games in this franchise. But the basic gist of all of the games is you must finish a round-the-world quest to destroy these bouncing balls terrorizing Earth, starting with Mount Fuji and then proceeding from one location to the next, taking out the balls everywhere you go. Locations include Mount Kirin, the Temple of the Emerald Buddha, the Angkor Wat, Ayers Rock, the Taj Mahal, Leningrad, Paris, London, Barcelona, Athens, Egypt, Mount Kilimanjaro, New York, the Mayan ruins, Antarctica, and finally, Easter Island. Each stage has a unique background, so you get a nice visual appeal even though you're doing the same thing from one stage to the next with minor variations. Usually those variations include ladders and platforms. Sometimes you have to shoot the platforms to get easier access to the balls. Sometimes the platforms are trapping the balls and you have to knock them away to release the balls. And sometimes the ladders are getting in your way and you must go up and down them to get to the balls that you want to hit. Usually when the balls are really big, they're not so hard to destroy, but they split into smaller balls that get harder and harder to accurately aim at. Sometimes you have to aim where they're not so that the shot that you fire intersects them by the time they reach there. And sometimes you get power-ups like a gun that you can shoot them in midair with, or a bomb that destroys all of them at once, or a shield that protects you as you're moving back and forth across and allows you to absorb a hit. The bigger ones aren't too much of a threat unless you run directly into them, which I am occasionally stupid enough to do. The small ones are the real problem because they bounce very low to the ground, so it's hard to get under them to fire a shot before they run into you, and you have to do what I was talking about earlier where you kind of lead a shot before it gets to you, and then it intersects your shot and you get it out of the way. So the little ones are really the ones that are going to nail you over and over again over time. So here's a full list of the weapons according to the Wikipedia page. Double wire, a twin harpoon that allows 2 shots simultaneously. Power wire, a grappling hook that stays attached to the ceiling or a block above for a short period of time. Vulcan missile, a high caliber gun that works like a machine gun allowing rapid shots. A force field that protects the player from one hit. An hourglass that slows the balls down. A clock which stops everything on the screen for a little while. And dynamite that pops everything and knocks it down to its next smallest size all at once. So yeah, even without reading the Wikipedia page, I pretty much described all of the weapons and power-ups. Occasionally, you get enemies on the screen as well, like crabs that will drop down from the ceiling and try to hit you, and a bee that'll buzz around and get in your way as you're firing shots. And usually that's a time-limiting factor, like the closer you get to running out of time, the more enemies that will appear on the screen to harass you. So you've got multiple goals here. You want to clear all the balls, you want to score the most points possible, you get a time bonus for the faster you clear it, and you also want to do it to avoid having so many enemies on the screen that you're unable to deal with it and you lose a life. But the way you'll typically lose a life is just getting hit by one of the tiny balls, because that's what happens to me more often than not. It's worth noting that Buster Brothers and Pumping World are exactly the same game other than the localization. I've never found any gameplay difference between the two, so the only consideration you should make as to which one you want to own, if you want a physical copy, would be the price. It's going to play the same no matter what you get. So what does Buster Brothers go for? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Currently, if you want the TurboGrafx CD version, which is what I'm playing here, it goes for $45 loose, $59 complete, and $162 new and sealed, which I never recommend because it's very easy to fake a sealed game. Somebody can reshrink wrap something and sell it to you as new, and it can be used on the inside. I'd prefer something that's been opened before, unless you trust the seller or you're buying it at an actual retailer like Best Buy or Target or Walmart. You know, I'm just not into that whole buying sealed games thing. And I'm not into graded games either. That's not my cup of tea. I'm not judging, not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying it adds a premium to the price, and then it also becomes something that you can never play because you have to keep it sealed to keep the value, because the moment you break the seal when you buy something sealed, you're lowering the value. So to me, that's just self-defeating. Again, not judging, but that's what Buster Brothers goes for. As for Pumping World, the Japanese version, as of the recording of this video, you could get a complete copy from Japan for $24.99 plus about $9 shipping. So $33, $34 would be a good price for it. You could probably get it for less if you found an American seller or a local seller to whatever region you live in where you are watching this video. But it can go for more than that, depending on condition and, of course, whether or not it's sealed. I've seen copies on eBay that go for over $100 new and sealed, so it's all up to you how much you would want to spend on that. But it seems like anywhere from $25 to $40 is a good benchmark at this time, which makes it on the more affordable end, not just of CD games for TurboGrafx Turbo Duo, but of PC Engine releases in general, because this has always been a higher end for retro game collecting. And $25 for this system, 25 to 35, very reasonable compared to some things. Now, obviously, I'd prefer games under $15, under $10, but that doesn't happen too often with this console. So, long story short, I feel like Buster Brothers is a very good arcade game, and this is a very excellent conversion of that arcade game. I don't think you would be dissatisfied with the repeat gameplay if you made that $25 to $35 investment. You would get your money's worth with repeated plays of this game, but don't take my word for it. You can always try it in emulation first, even though Ryan Taylor would say it's always better on real hardware, which is why I'm doing that here. I'm not going to tell you to not fire up OpenEMU or any other emulator that you prefer and give it a test drive there first before you put down your money. Once you own it physically, you could either continue to play it in emulation and keep that as a backup. You could run it on your authentic hardware, or you could load it on a micro SD card, put it in an SSD 3, and keep playing it to your heart's content. But emulation is definitely a viable option in this case because physical media doesn't last forever. CDs are more fragile than cartridges in general, so don't count on those physical CDs not delaminating at some point, or disc rot eventually wearing through and data being lost and the disc being unreadable. There are all sorts of things that can happen to plastic over time. Nothing is forever. CDs do last a pretty good while, but they're not infallible. Cartridges aren't either. I mean, you can get corrosion of the contacts, you can have chips fail. It seems more rare to me that cartridges go bad than CDs. They can usually be resurrected with some cleaning, and a lot of CDs can be resurrected with some cleaning too, but there are risks to retro collecting, which is another reason that I wouldn't advise anybody spend really big money on a sealed game, because how do you even know that the sealed game inside of the package still works? You might be spending a lot of money for dead media. That doesn't make sense to me. It's like spending $1,000 on a VHS tape and sticking it in a VCR, and it's been played so many times that it doesn't even work anymore. It's unplayable. It's just garbled. There's garbage on the screen. It won't track. It moves up and down, or the picture goes fuzzy because somebody paused, rewound on one particular scene they like, or the tape just snaps off in the VCR and you have to pull out a mess of spaghetti. I don't know that there are $1,000 VHS tapes. That was just a completely random segue. Maybe that exists, maybe that doesn't. But if it does, I would never spend that kind of money for a VHS tape because I'd be afraid to ever even play it. And then what's the point of having it? I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been Popping World. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe. It helps the channel grow. And I'll see you next time for another PC Engine game on another Tuesday, like we always do about this time. See you then. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and today on the PC Engine Files, we are looking at Cosmic Fantasy II, a TurboGrafx CD game released in 1992, the first project from Working Designs for the TurboGrafx 16. Now, where is Cosmic Fantasy 1? Good question. That never came out in North America. Only this game, which I can imagine already limited the very limited TurboGrafx audience even further. First of all, you had to own a TurboGrafx. Second of all, you had to have the CD add-on. Third of all, you had to be interested in an RPG for which you had never played any of the previous games and were already playing the sequel to those games. Yeah, not gonna sell so well, I think. It was developed by Nippon Telenet, and it's what you would call a typical dungeon crawler with some nicely animated segments in between to expand upon the plot. And what is that plot? Well, it goes a little something like this. You're playing as a 16-year-old boy named Van, and you reside in a village on Clan Island on the planet of Idea. While he's out exploring because he is, as one of the villagers dubs him, a barbarian who likes to hunt meat with his spear, he sees a nearby village get attacked by an explosion, and he rushes over to see what is the matter, which is what we're going to watch here as he talks to all of these different villagers and finds out that they've been attacked by an evil wizard named Wisda, one of the henchmen of Gallum. And who is Gallum? Well, an evil ne'er-do-well looking for the Princess of Idea. Van learns from talking to the villagers that she can be recognized through her royal pendant, and that princess is Laura. Who's Laura? His childhood sweetheart. He carved her name into a tree and professed to forever love her, not knowing that she was actually a princess. When he hears the news, he rushes back to his village and discovers his village is under attack from monsters as well. So that's kind of a bummer because you get random enemy encounters on the world map, and then when you go back home, you get random enemy encounters in the village too, so you can't even get a moment's rest even when you go back home. But for better or worse, that's by design. You're supposed to take an ass kicking early in the game. You run home and you talk to your friend Abel, and he tells you that Gallum's forces have already kidnapped Laura, and when you try to rescue her, you are powerless to stop Wisda. You can only watch bloody and bruised, as Wikipedia says, as the wizard takes Laura away. Abel is able to rescue Van, no pun intended, telling him to calm down and that Laura possesses magical powers that may grant immortality to the one who marries her, but for unknown reasons that power is only unlocked on her 17th birthday, and to make matters worse, whoever takes her hand in marriage gets her powers transferred to him. That's a pretty shitty arrangement if you ask me. Why would you even want to be a princess in such a kingdom? It seems like you would just renounce the throne and say, yeah, nobody's getting my magic, nobody is kidnapping me and forcing me into a marriage, I'm just going to abdicate the throne and go away, and you can't have my immortality and nor can anybody else. Goodbye, see you, good riddance. Now, I'm not going to say too much more about the plot of Cosmic Fantasy 2 because if you've never played it before, I don't want to give everything away, and it gets pretty wacky. It involves time travel, space pirates, all sorts of adventures going on beyond just this little world that you live on. But suffice it to say, the cosmic part does come into play, even though it seems like a normal fantasy RPG up to the point we're playing it in this video. I'd rather tell you some more interesting facts about the game, such as that it's considered to be the first third-party CD game on a home console. Not developed by NEC, so not an original first-party game. I guess it holds that distinction because CD-ROM systems were so new at the time. I don't even think Sega CD was out yet in the US or Japan, where it would have been the Mega Drive CD and not the Genesis CD attachment. But either way, this was at a very early point in the adoption of CD-ROM technology, so who am I to argue if they say it is? And apparently, because CD-ROM technology was so new, it had a, quote, 1-to-1 attach rate for owners of the TurboGrafx CD system, which suggests it must have been a very early release in the lineup of TurboGrafx CD-ROM games, and they claim 20,000 units sold. Which would also mean that if that's the case, and it's a 1-to-1 attach rate, they only sold 20,000 TurboGrafx CD units, which doesn't sound that good to me. But again, we were talking about a small platform and an even smaller install base of CD games, so yeah, that's why some of these TurboGrafx CD games are so darned expensive. But this, because of that high attach rate, I guess, is one of the somewhat affordable ones. $55 complete, $97 brand new. But then by comparison, the Japanese version is dirt cheap. $1.52 loose, $5 loose, $9 complete. So if you just want to get the Japanese version, rip it from the CD and patch it, that's probably a better cheaper, more cost-effective way to go because the gameplay is going to be the same. All you need to do is change the language from Japanese to English. It's a decent RPG as these things go. I wouldn't call it the greatest thing I've ever played. I wouldn't call it the worst either. Somewhere in the middle, enhanced by those animated cutscenes, even though it's obvious that the lips aren't synced with the dialogue, it's still impressive that they dubbed it over with English dialogue and put it into the game instead of just leaving it as it is, subtitled. That might be the other reason to own the Japanese version, though, to hear the original language and see it synced up with the voices if that's something that actually matters to you. But other than that, I would say if you're looking for an RPG experience on TurboGrafx CD or Turbo Duo, Cosmic Fantasy 2 is not a bad place to start. In fact, it's probably an immediately accessible option if you're at all familiar with role-playing games. If you played Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest, if you played Final Fantasy, if you played Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross, etc., and so on, you're going to be just fine playing Cosmic Fantasy 2. There's nothing here that's going to throw you for a loop. It's the standard turn-based affair when you encounter a party of monsters. They attack you, you attack them. They do damage, you do damage. You use herbs to heal up if your hit points get too low. You level up when you gain enough experience from fights. All of this stuff will be rote. It's standard for RPGs, not just of the time, but any time since then. This is like the tried and true basic formula of RPGs. So in that sense, I can almost understand a 1-to-1 attach rate, because if you were going to get a CD-ROM add-on, this is exactly the kind of thing you would have bought for it to play on it, because where else were you getting an RPG experience like this, except possibly on home computers of the time? So this would have scratched that itch for anybody who wanted to actually go to the trouble of investing in TurboGrafx CD technology. Bottom line, Cosmic Fantasy 2, I wouldn't say it's a must-own unless you're TurboGrafx and PC Engine collecting, but if you are, might want to put this one on your list. It could greatly enhance your experience with the system, but do try it first in emulation or on a Super SD System 3. Happy mobile, it's impossible, it's impossible. Yes, I couldn't resist going a little off script this week, but it's impossible for TurboGrafx 16 on the PC Engine files. What is this game? Why is this game? What are we even talking about here? Well, this is the 6th, yes, count on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it's number 6 in the series of Monty Mole games. You might have already guessed that from the background music, because it sounds very much like Monty on the Run to me. I'm sure they drew direct inspiration from that chiptune for that classic Commodore 64 game, ZX Spectrum too, I think, but Monty on the Run is included on the C64 Mini if you have it, so that's like 3 games before this. Not only is this the 6th game in the series, it's the final Monty Mole game, so if you hadn't gotten your fill of Monty Mole by this point, yeah, you were out of luck, because there was never going to be any more after this. Who is Monty Mole? What is Monty Mole? Well, he started out in 1984 as the star of a game created by Gremlin Graphics, developed by Peter Harrop and Anthony Crowther. Yes, dear Mr. Crowther, you control a mole who has to collect coal. A coal mining mole. How quaint! And that was where Monty Mole got his origins. So, from there we had Monty is Innocent in 1985, where the titular mole was sentenced to 5 years in Scudmore Prison for stealing a bucket of coal, and his best friend, Sam Stoat, is determined to free Monty from jail. In the third game, Monty on the Run, he is on the run from authorities after his intervention in a coal miner's strike, so he must escape from his house and head for the English Channel and freedom in Europe. The fourth game was Auf Wiedersehen Monty. Monty travels around Europe collecting money in order to buy a Greek island where he can safely retire. The fifth game was Moly Christmas. It was only released as a tape on the cover of Your Sinclair magazine. He's tasked with recovering the source code to his latest game and getting into the duplication plant. It's pretty wacky for that to be the premise of a Monty Mole game and to be given away free on the cover of a magazine. Although it's not unprecedented. I mentioned Bomboozle in a previous episode. That was actually given away on the cover of a magazine as well. So if you had a Commodore Amiga and you had that magazine subscription, you got Bomboozle for free. And this is the sixth and final game, Impossible. It was first released for Amiga, Atari ST, C64, Amstrad CPC, and the ZX Spectrum, and then got a port to TurboGrafx-16 a year later. Developed by Core Design, published by Gremlin Graphics, produced by James North Hearn, designed by Alex Davis, Bernie Hill, Ian Stewart, programmed by Alex Davis and Ashley Bennett, and composed by Barry Leitch. Leitch, you did a great job here. This is a very classic Mr. Hubbard sounding chiptune. Like I said, it reminds me of Monty on the Run. Everything in this game is musically impeccable. And it's a side-scrolling platforming game where the titular Monty Mole has now been given superpowers by some mysterious entity who apparently just wants Monty Mole to do his bidding by collecting all the items that he's looking for. I don't think the mole even needed superpowers to do that. He probably could have gotten by just with his wits and his digging skills, but nope, he's been herked up. But it's a weird kind of superpower that's very limited. Like, he looks like a superhero, he's got a cape, he's obviously very strong, but yet he easily gets knocked back by enemy damage, and if you give a mole superpowers, like, it's still a mole, so it can only be so invincible. It's very invincible, as a matter of fact. Monty Mole is, for a superhero, he's just not that strong or that powerful. And powerful also does not describe the price of this game. It's actually one of the more affordable TurboGrafx-16 games that you can pick up. I say more affordable given that none of them are inexpensive, but loose, 35, complete 45, new 65. Yeah, that's on the lower end of the TurboGrafx-16 spectrum. So either one, it didn't sell well because nobody in the United States or North America territory knew who Monty Mole was and cared that much, because Monty Mole was much more of a phenomenon in Europe and especially the United Kingdom, or two, they just printed so many copies of Impossible that it's relatively common compared to the rest of the TurboGrafx library. It's probably not as common as Keith Courage and Alpha Zones because that was back in, but again, given the spectrum of cheap to expensive on TurboGrafx games, it's definitely on the more affordable side. Should you pick it up though? Debatable. I mean, I'm a fan of the Monty Mole games, even though they're somewhat obscure for the North American US gamer. I think they're fun, and I think this one has a charm to it, despite the fact that this super-powered version of Monty Mole isn't that super. I do like a platforming game. A game starring Monty Mole in that aspect is always entertaining to me. He's actually much more fluid to control than he is in some of the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum games. That may be that I'm using a D-pad instead of a joystick, but I feel like he actually has the proper weight and gravity to his jumps, and that you can easily move him in the directions you want to move him, whereas sometimes in a game like Monty on the Run, you're just kind of pressing the button and praying for the best that he'll land where you want him to land, because they didn't quite have platforming down at that point yet. So Mario Brothers, whether you like to admit it or not, became the de facto standard for platforming games. Like, once that became the way you controlled a character in air, the way you moved him from one platform to the next, all games in the platforming genre sort of had to borrow from it or imitate it to some degree to be successful, because Nintendo fine-tuned it so well that it just didn't feel right to do it in a lot of other games. That, as I say in some of my other videos, sometimes you get a platform game that's a floater. It just hangs around in the air forever, and that doesn't feel right. And then sometimes you get a game where you can barely get an inch off the ground before you're slammed back to the earth, and that doesn't feel right either. You gotta hit that careful balance between too little and too much, and it has to be responsive to your inputs. When you hit left or right on the D-pad, it shouldn't take a few seconds for the character to do anything, and when you hit jump, you should jump right away. So, Impossible technically is a sound game. Music is good, the controls are good, the graphical style is good, and yet it feels cheap at times. And I don't mean cheap in quality, I mean cheap in the way that you get sandbagged. Like, you're moving left to right and a boulder drops on your head, and you try to pause and wait for the boulder to drop, and then you still take damage from it when you walk up to it. Even though it's just sitting there, the boulder still damages you anyway. That's cheap to me. I don't understand the purpose of that. And given that he's super powered, I would expect him to be able to knock out enemies in one punch or one kick, but it takes like 2 or 3. And clearly they know that this super-powered mole isn't super-powered, because they give you weapons. You can pick up machine guns and fire them at your enemies. That works better than your actual superpower hero super offense. It could be called super offensive, given that you can't really knock anybody out with your bare hands. So yeah, Kal-El, he is not. So you get guns and you shoot enemies and you do these tasks like collecting scrolls, and then it just sort of feels like, why do I get a cheap death and have to go all the way back and do all that all over again? Why can't I just pick it up from the point where I died? That would make this game a lot less cheap, but here I have to go all the way through this castle, all the way back down into the subterranean lair, and all the way back to the point I was at before. If I was using save states, it might not be nearly as frustrating, but I'm not. I'm trying to give you an authentic experience of what Impossible is like. So I don't not recommend this game. It's just going to be a trial and error game. You're not going to get through it super fast. You can't pick up speed and just blaze through it. You've got to take your time, know where the traps are, know where the items are, and just commit yourself to the grind. And if you're not down for that, then Impossible will not be your game. But if you have an affection for Monty Mole, then perhaps Impossible will be right for you. And if you're looking for an affordable TurboGrafx 16 game that you don't already have, this is a good place to start. But try it in emulation first. I always say that, and I really do mean it. Don't throw down $30, $60, $100 for a TurboGrafx or a PC Engine game without knowing if you're really getting your money's worth, because they aren't cheap. Do you ever play a TurboGrafx game and immediately get the feeling it was a Commodore Amiga game before you get 2 steps into it? I sure did with this one. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this is Shadow of the Beast. And my suspicions were correct when I looked it up on Wikipedia. The original version was released on Amiga in 1989, and it was followed by two sequels, Shadow of the Beast 2 in 1990, Shadow of the Beast 3 in 1992, and a remake for PS4 in 2016 that included the Commodore Amiga original. So my guess is that would be considered to be the definitive version of this game. But it sure came out on a lot of different things. Amiga, Atari ST, Amstrad, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, the FM Towns Marty of all things, Atari Lynx, Sega Master System, and this TurboGrafx CD-ROM version that we are playing here. Here's the plot regardless of which version you're playing. You're a man named Abram who was kidnapped as a child, and you've been corrupted by magic into a warrior servant for the evil beast lord Malatoth. The creature's memory of human life returns when he watches a man being executed, who he later realizes was his father, so Abram promptly seeks revenge on Malatoth, and a long journey ensues with Abram forced to battle his way through both hostile terrain and Malatoth's forces, which leads to an ultimate confrontation with one of Malatoth's minions, who is so large that you can only see his hand and his foot. This all sounds promising from the synopsis, doesn't it? Well, the game ticked me off almost immediately, and I was trying very hard to be positive, even though I suspected what I got was a port of a game that came from computers and not an original TurboGrafx 16 game. But then it told me to go in, and I did what the game instructed me to do, and I ended up climbing this long ladder to the bottom of a shaft, only to find a locked door that I had no way to open. So why did the game tell me to go there, and then have me do this tedious task to get there, and then have nothing for me to do once I arrived there? That does not say good design, in my opinion. You don't tell somebody to go in somewhere when they don't have a key to get through the area they're going into. You tell them to get the key to unlock the door for the area they're going into. You don't point them in the direction of something they can't do. So whoever ported this game either left something out, or the original game was bad to begin with. And then you have to do the tedious climb all the way back up to the surface just to go and do what you should have done, instead of going into the area they very clearly directed you to go into, with a bright red blinking sign that said in and red arrows pointing up and down at that very spot. Now then, let me try to be slightly more positive now that I'm back on the surface. There is some charm here. This has a very nice soundtrack. It's not grating, it's not unpleasant. It slowly builds up into a well-crafted melody over time. It is the kind of thing that could suck you into the gameplay a little bit. And the graphics, although again, based on the lettering and the style of the numbers and the general feel of the game, immediately struck me as a port from the Amiga. It's not unpleasant to look at least graphically the design seems to hold up in the transition. There's even a little bit of parallax scrolling going on. You've got a distant layer of clouds in the sky, some terrain that you're traversing in front of, trees much closer to you, and then enemies in the front layer directly next to you. So I will admit they put some thought into all these different layers to try to make it a visually arresting game and give it a depth that you didn't see from a lot of 8 or 16-bit games at the time. This was not the greatest achievement of all time in either of those cases, but it's pretty good by the standards of the day. If you look at the reviews, contemporary reviews from when the game was released, the scores are all over the map for the different versions. Mega Drive got 20 out of 40, so 50%. TurboGrafx got less than that, 18 out of 40. Yet the PC home computer versions got 5 out of 5 stars and 90 out of 100. So I feel we have definitely lost something in translation here. The one thing that I think bothers me the most about Shadow of the Beast is the completely arbitrary way that enemies just pop up and run right into you, or fly right into you, or just appear out of the ground, and you have no warning, no time to prepare, and you literally just have to stop every few seconds and throw a punch expecting something to hit you. Now, reportedly, the game's designers intended it this way, but I don't know, because it seems to me if the scores are that wildly different across the different versions, it must have been intended to be done with keyboard controls or a joystick on a computer, or maybe even a mouse if Commodore Amigas had a mouse back then. I don't know. It just feels like there's something about the speed on the CD-ROM TurboGrafx version that's way out of whack, because things come at you far faster than you can react. And maybe with a keyboard or a joystick on a computer, you could react to them, but using the TurboGrafx controller on a TurboGrafx 16, you barely get any time to respond before you get smacked. And you do get a generous amount of hit points to start, and you can pick up little red power-ups when you destroy bricks and statues, and pick up those and get some of your health back, but it depletes very quickly because you just get everything thrown at you. Kitchen sink, flying axes, missiles. That part I don't understand. Okay, this is a fantasy realm, a supernatural magical adventure, and yet all of a sudden missiles are flying at you like it's suddenly a sci-fi game. What? This game's design, it just baffles me. I can tell there was thought and care put into how it looks and how it sounds, but then it seems like they just decided, let's be completely wacky and throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. It's like they had some degree of forethought and planning, and then they just abandoned it and decided, what the heck, we'll do anything we feel like. And how am I supposed to get past this dragon? I can't do any damage to it. I can't crawl through it. I don't have a weapon to use on it. It just seems to be a dead end. And you hit dead ends a lot in Shadow of the Beast. I don't know. I feel like I could like this game. Perhaps even that I should like this game. But somehow they just didn't get it right. They did some things that are visually and musically impressive, and then they just crapped the bed on the controls and crapped the bed on how difficult it would be to make any progress. So I suspect don't play this one on an actual console. Play it on an emulator with save states, because you get hit by so many things so quickly that you're going to need to save your progress by freezing a save state and going back to it, because you'll run out of health, you'll run out of lives, you'll have to start back over from the beginning. So you might as well do what this game makes you do and play it tediously and methodically from one section to the next by saving often. Is that a good game? I don't know. I do know that I wouldn't spend the kind of money that it commands. $59 loose, $75 complete, $210 new. Only slightly more affordable if you import it. $34 loose, $74 complete, $153 new. The only really affordable versions of this complete are on Atari Lynx, where it's $20, and Sega Master System in PAL territory, where it's $8. So the way I read this, it kind of seems like it was intended for the European market all along, far more so than North America, which shouldn't really be a surprise when you consider that Psygnosis was based in Liverpool and eventually became a wholly owned subsidiary of Sony based in the same location. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and today on the PC Engine Files, you're getting 5 for the price of 1. That's right, I'm testing 5 import games for PC Engine on my TurboGrafx 16 using the computer converter, as it's called. It's a rather strange looking generic box, but inside of it is a genuine PC Engine to TurboGrafx 16 HuCard adapter. So I bought some import games, and the first one I got is Super Momotaru Densetsu, Super Peach Boy Dream, and at first I thought it was going to be either a strategy game or an arcade game, but it turns out to be more of a Mario Party style board game where you roll dice and move this train around the screen, and then you land on tiles and take whatever action it tells you to take when you get there, which is admittedly a little hard for me to decipher since all of the options that you're given are in Japanese. Now, if I'd known that, I might have reconsidered whether or not I wanted this one, but it was a loose hue card that was only $1, and it was a Peach Boy game, and I was already doing an order where I was getting a Super Famicom Peach Boy game complete in box, so I just kind of went with it thinking it'll be whatever it is, and I'll either like it or I won't. And I'm not saying that I don't like it, it's just I don't really know what to do once I land on a space. I can move around the board, I can roll the dice, and after that it's just a guessing game, so I need a patch of some kind to make any further progress. The same holds true for Jaiskin Necromancer, which too was only $1, although this one wasn't loose, it was inside a HuCard case, but no cover artwork was included, which I find really strange. Why would you keep the game and the case, but not keep the artwork? Whatever. This one is an RPG, and you know what that means. It means you're only going to get so far if you don't read Japanese. But this one's a curious one in that it was actually released for the Wii Virtual Console back in the 2000s without being patched. It was released in all regions in Japanese. But I believe the homebrew scene, the ROM hacking scene, whatever you want to call it, has solved this problem. I'm given to understand there is a patch available, so if I dump this game and patch it, or if I find a pre-existing one that's already patched, I should be able to play Jisuken Necromancer by just loading it up on my Super SD System 3 and going from there. It certainly looks interesting, I just don't know what any of these people are saying to me, or vice versa. But you can see some of the basic tropes, hit points, magic points, etc. Then we move on to F1 Triple Battle, which, once again, only $1. And this one I figured, well, it's a racing game, so it's not going to be that hard to figure out, even though my cat seems to be complaining about it in the background. Yeah, Tango, sorry, you can't play this. You don't have hands. Sorry, that's an old Jacques joke from John Tron. And anyway, racing games, they're pretty much the same in all regions. You can even see all the important information here is all in English. We're at the Brazilian Grand Prix, round 1, free practice lap. You're going for the fastest speed. Even the names of the other racers are in English, so it's pretty easy to play most racing games that are imports. Although I wonder if that's supposed to be the wind blowing across the screen, or whether that's my HuCard making bad contact with the game converter. Tango has opinions about that. I don't know. I don't know if that's supposed to be the wind or not. This one, it seems very hard to drift around the turns. You get up any kind of speed, you go into a turn, you're going to slam all the way from one side to the other almost immediately, unless you let off the gas and or brake really hard. And even if you do, you still drift very wide. I'm sure I can, quote unquote, get good with enough practice, but on this quote-unquote free practice, it's a little bit tough. On the plus side, it does shift gears automatically for you. You don't have to use up and down to go from first, second, third, fourth, and fifth gear. I mean, you can, but if you're just speeding up, it automatically shifts into the next gear. So when you're on the straightaways, you can pick up speed really fast. Here's another racing game, F1 Pilot. I like this one a little better because it actually gives you the cockpit perspective as opposed to looking down at the racetrack a la pole position. This time you're actually in the driver's seat. Although maybe the road doesn't look as good as it does in the other game, but the perspective makes it worth it. I feel it's a good trade-off, and it's also a little easier to control. Obviously, I swung wide around that turn, but I can actually get accommodated to it between the speed I want to be going and the speed I need to go around these cars, and slow down accordingly and not seem to drift as wide as I did before. Still drifting out too much, but I feel like if I turn before I go around the corners, it'll probably be a little bit better. I was just also trying to maneuver around these cars at the same time, so I was swinging wide to get around them and causing myself to go over the road line into that forbidden zone, into the area where it's going to slow down your car tremendously. But this seems enjoyable, and I like the addition of the mountain background, which shifts as you turn different ways around the track. It's nice that they thought to include some visual appeal as opposed to just the cars, the race, and the track. Not every racing game gives you the extra with a landscape in the background that moves as you turn, so I appreciate the thought that went into this. Pack-in Video, you did a pretty good job on this one. Not perfect, but more than acceptable. Finally, here we have Yokai to Chucky, or Yokai to Chuki, depending on which way you want to pronounce it. And this game came out on so many platforms I can't even list them all, but you may have previously seen me playing it on Famicom, and it is indeed the same game. And this game was so mass-produced that it's pretty cheap on any platform. It was $1 on Famicom, it's $1 on PC Engine. You're not going to spend a lot for this game. You just take out all these monsters as they come along, you collect the money, you collect the power-ups, and there's a weird little gambling mechanic that comes up when you run into this giant frog, and he immediately challenges you to a game of dice, but I don't know what we're rolling, whether it's a winning combination or a losing combination, because I initially seemed to be doubling up my money at every turn, and then all of a sudden it went south, and I lost all my money, and apparently losing all your money in this game kills you because I got a game over. Well, I suppose losing all your money in real life would kill you too, because then you couldn't afford food or electricity or rent or anything, so maybe that's not too inaccurate, but either way, that ended my session of Yokai to Chuki really quick. But that doesn't mean I won't come back to it, because hey, it's a complete box PC Engine game for only $1. You just can't beat that, and it's a very straightforward platforming game aside from this one little gambling mechanic section, so I recommend it. I recommend it on Famicom as well, or an English language patch if you've got one and you want to play it that way as well. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the PC Engine Files. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week, where we'll probably just do one game.